December 22nd, 1974. The air was biting. A group of friends moved through a desolate stretch of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Their shortcut through the wilderness ended abruptly. A discovery lay ahead that would haunt them forever. Silence fell. Beneath the shadow of the Gatlinburg Ski Lodge tramway station, they found the stillness of death. Human remains. It was a woman. She was found prone against a tree. Beneath her, a coat had been carefully laid out. The scene suggested she had been resting there before she died. The witness's initial shock was visceral. This was no natural setting. Nature had begun its work. Decomposition was advanced. Her features were lost to the passage of time. Disbelief set in. Her identity was a void. The circumstances of her presence in those woods were entirely unknown. Questions lingered in the mountain air. They stood over the site, attempting to process the gravity of their find. Reality took hold. Duty replaced shock. They understood the immediate necessity of involving the law. A call was placed to the Gatlinburg Police Department. Urgency defined their voices. They waited for the authorities to arrive. Investigation was imminent. Responding officers navigated the rugged terrain toward the secluded coordinates where the body lay. The scene was secured. Protocol began. Detectives sought to reconstruct the final moments of a life ended in isolation. The search for clues was meticulous. However, her garments offered no immediate answers. There was a conspicuous absence of personal items. Identification was missing. She wore a white blouse. It was short-sleeved and patterned with small, yellow blossoms. Over the floral blouse, she had a white sweater. A dark blue coat provided a final, heavy layer over her remains. She wore dark blue trousers and thick men's socks over pantyhose. Her wrists and fingers bore no rings or jewelry. The most disturbing detail emerged. She was barefoot. A wide perimeter search was conducted through the brush. The woods remained silent. No footwear or clues were recovered. The investigators were left with a deepening vacuum of information. Leads were non-existent. The decision was made to recover the remains. They were transported for professional forensic analysis. The path to the truth began in the morgue. Naming the victim was the priority. Without a name, there could be no justice. The cause of death was the secondary mystery. Experts hoped the pathology report would speak where the evidence could not. The resolution would not come quickly. Decades would pass. The trail was destined to grow cold before it ever got warm. Dr. John Hickey took charge. As the Sevier County Medical Examiner, the weight of the identification rested on his shoulders. Progress stalled. Assistance was required. Hickey consulted Dr. William Bass, a prominent figure in state forensic anthropology. The specialists collaborated. The remains were moved to the University of Tennessee Memorial Research Center and Hospital. In this clinical setting, the autopsy would commence. Science would attempt to peel back the layers of the mystery. Tension filled the laboratory. Every bone and fiber was scrutinized. They looked for the story of how she died. The results were inconclusive. No specific cause of death could be established. The body refused to give up its secrets. The investigation hit a wall. Signs of trauma or foul play were absent. This lack of evidence was both a relief and a burden. No violence was confirmed. Yet, the absence of a struggle only made her presence in the woods more enigmatic. January 1975. The search for her name intensified. Investigators pushed for any scrap of information that could break the case. Effort was relentless. Inquiries were dispatched to law enforcement agencies across multiple states. No lead was too small. Federal and state bureaus were engaged. The FBI and TBI joined the hunt. Despite this massive coordination, the trail remained frozen. The wall remained. Frustration settled over the department. Giving this woman her identity back felt like an impossible task. Silence returned. The case files were shelved. For over 30 years, the Gatlinburg Jane Doe remained a haunting, unsolved puzzle. 2007 brought new resolve. Detectives looked to the future for answers. Modern technology offered a glimmer of hope. Digital forensic tools were employed. A new face began to emerge from the data. A computerized reconstruction was initiated. The image was striking. For the first time, investigators had a visual representation of the woman they were searching for. Physical statistics were projected. Height, weight, and features were meticulously estimated. They hoped a familiar face would spark a memory. The public response was hollow. The reconstruction failed to generate a definitive match. Once again, the mystery held firm. The composite became another artifact of the case. It was a digital ghost. Her identity remained locked behind a wall of silence. Time continued its march. The image served only as a reminder of a life forgotten. The investigation remained in limbo. Later that year, another avenue was explored. Advanced dental identification systems were utilized. They searched for a match in the records. The NCIC database was queried. Even this high-tech search yielded nothing. The woman's name continued to elude them. The puzzle stayed incomplete. Persistence was the only remaining tool. The case was moved to a new specialized unit. The National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, known as nameless, held the case file. A silent vigil for a woman whose name remained a mystery. Detective Cindy Myers of the Gatlinburg Police Department lived with this silence. For years, the unidentified woman's file was a persistent shadow on her desk. Decades of dead-end leads and stalled inquiries had passed. Every attempt to find an answer had crumbled into further uncertainty. Resolution seemed impossible. Then, in 2021, a shift in forensic capability offered a flicker of genuine possibility. Realizing that science had evolved exponentially since the 1970s, Myers took a decisive gamble. She sought a new path. She contacted Othram, a Texas-based laboratory at the forefront of forensic genetic genealogy. They specialized in the unsolvable. The woman's remains were moved to the Texas facility. There, technicians began the cold, precise work of extracting a biological blueprint. Through advanced genome sequencing, a complete DNA profile emerged. Othram specialists then began navigating the vast digital landscape of human ancestry. The search for kin began. The team sifted through distant connections, cross-referencing markers with the precision of a surgeon. Public archives and complex family lineages were scrutinized. Gradually, a fragmented map started to point toward a specific bloodline. The process was grueling and required immense patience. Finally, the genealogical fog lifted, revealing a definitive path forward. In February 2023, Othram notified Detective Myers. They had located a potential match, a woman residing in Arkansas. When investigators spoke with her, the conversation took a chilling turn. A long-buried family tragedy surfaced. Her sister had vanished in August 1974. She was thought to be in Tennessee when the world lost track of her. A reference sample was taken from the Arkansas resident. It was compared directly against the remains found decades prior. The wait ended. The laboratory confirmed the connection. The genetic data was an undeniable match. The woman was Charlotte Roberta Henry. She was 35 years old when her life came to its abrupt conclusion. For Detective Myers and her colleagues, it was a hard-won victory. Their refusal to abandon the case had finally yielded a name. A sense of profound relief followed the identification. Charlotte's history, however, remained a collection of missing pieces and unanswered questions. Investigators began reconstructing a life lost to time. She was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on January 4, 1939. Details of her upbringing are sparse. Her personal life, including marriage and whether she had children, remains largely undocumented. Only one final family memory exists. Charlotte was last seen attending her father's funeral in April 1974. Following that service, she slipped away. The silence was briefly interrupted in August of that same year. A single letter arrived, postmarked from Memphis, Tennessee. It was the last communication her family would ever receive. Her vanishing left a void of confusion and grief. For decades, her family lived with the heavy weight of the unknown. Her fate was a dark mystery until modern science bridged the gap. Technology finally gave back the name she had lost. Detective Myers confirmed a final, necessary step. Charlotte's remains would no longer be evidence in a cold case file. She is returning to her family. She will finally be buried with the dignity that every human being is owed. September 16, 1993. Laborers at a Fairfield Inn, now a Quality Inn, stumbled upon a grim scene in the Georgia woods. Within North Lake, DeKalb County, they found a body in an advanced state of decay. The placement appeared deliberate. It lay concealed behind an electrical unit, hidden under a layer of pine straw and debris. The victim wore a black t-shirt. The shirt featured a colorful Waikoloa monogram. She was also wearing black jeans. The workers immediately contacted the authorities. Police arrived at 2155 Ranchwood Drive. The site sat less than 20 miles from the heart of Atlanta. An immediate inquiry began in the northeast outskirts of the city. The priority was twofold: identify the woman and find her killer. Investigators had no way of knowing the search for truth would span nearly 30 years of silence. The medical examiner's report provided a skeletal profile. The remains were those of a white female. She had long, curly brown hair. Her height was estimated at 5 feet 5 inches, weighing approximately 130 pounds. Forensic analysis revealed signs of extreme violence. She suffered significant facial trauma and a fractured neck. These injuries confirmed a brutal assault. Experts estimated the body had remained at the site for several weeks or months. The time frame for her discovery was placed between 2 weeks and 3 months after her death. She had undergone significant dental procedures and a hip replacement. This surgery likely resulted in a distinct labored gait. Despite these specific physical markers, her identity remained elusive. The clues did not lead to a name. Physical evidence was limited to her dental work. A gold bridge, 2 gold crowns, and porcelain fused to metal teeth were documented. Beyond her dental history, there was nothing. No identification, no personal effects, and no voice to tell her story. The department confirmed that no missing persons report matched her description. She had vanished without being officially missed. For nearly 30 years, the remains were nothing more than a nameless file until a leap in technological capability occurred. The same genetic genealogy used to capture the Golden State Killer was employed to finally bridge the gap between mystery and truth. National databases for the missing collaborated with Othram, a private laboratory that focuses exclusively on the complexities of forensic DNA. This specialized science offered a path forward for the cold case. The testing eventually pinpointed a biological connection to a living relative. That family member provided the testimony needed to name the dead. She was Rebecca Burke, known as Becky to those who loved her, aged 52. At the time her life was taken, she resided in Georgia. Her final known location was placed within the Marietta or Smyrna areas of Cobb County. Through interviews with her kin, detectives began to piece together the fragments of a stolen life. They began to see the woman behind the tragedy. Details regarding her history and personal struggles started to emerge. Relatives indicated that Rebecca navigated the world under different aliases. She sometimes utilized the surnames McChesney or Barnes. This identification provided the first flicker of peace in a long-dormant investigation. The Burke family finally received the closure that had eluded them for decades. For years, they had lived in the shadow of the unknown. Yet, identifying the victim was only the first step. The autopsy confirmed the most sinister reality. Rebecca's end was a deliberate act of homicide. She was murdered. For her grieving family, only the capture of the individual responsible could truly balance the scales of justice. Investigators are currently pushing to find the person who took Becky Burke's life. Consider the morning of September 20th, 1991. Just as the sun rose, 2 hospital employees noticed a strange shape in the weeds near South Beach. It resembled a discarded mannequin on Seaview Avenue. Their curiosity led them closer to the roadside. What they discovered there would become a permanent, haunting fixture in their minds. It was no mannequin. They found a woman's body, bound in handcuffs and ravaged by the heat of a fire. Their voices were tight with shock as they contacted the New York Police Department. Patrol units were immediately sent to the coastal location. Detectives secured the scene and began their grim work. The initial examination revealed a level of violence that was difficult to fathom. The victim had suffered 17 blunt force strikes to the skull. A 13-inch hammer was discovered hidden beneath the folds of her black dress. The weapon lay right there at the crime scene. As the search widened, investigators began to collect the victim's few remaining earthly possessions. They recovered 2 gold chains, a ring, and a watch. There was 30 cents in change and an unopened pack of Newport cigarettes. No wallet or identification card was found on her person. The police were left with no immediate way to determine who she was. Their only hope for a name rested on a single, permanent mark. A distinct scorpion was tattooed on her right buttock. Detectives understood that the victim's identity was the key to the entire case. Naming her would inevitably lead them to the person who killed her. The murderer had clearly attempted to erase his crime with fire. He wanted to destroy the evidence of his own depravity, but he left one crucial piece of evidence behind. A blood-stained 13-inch hammer remained as a silent witness to the assault. This specific tool was common in auto body repair shops. It had been left at the scene, tucked away under the victim's clothing. Investigators initially believed the case would be resolved in short order. They had a unique tattoo and a very specific murder weapon. The hammer's handle even bore an engraved name, Lloyd L. It seemed the path to the killer's front door was already paved. They could not have known that 30 years would pass before the victim was named. The killer would remain in the shadows even longer. In 1991, the trail was still fresh. Police quickly focused their attention on a man named Lloyd L. He was located and brought in for an interrogation. However, the subsequent investigation failed to produce any link between him and the crime. There was simply no evidence to justify a prosecution. He could not be held responsible for a death he could not be tied to. Names can be shared by many, and a tool can change hands easily. The presence of the hammer was not enough to prove he committed the murder. Detectives were forced to try a different tactic. They chose to appeal to the public, hoping someone would recognize the victim's belongings. Images of the scorpion tattoo and her jewelry were distributed to the media. They waited for a friend or relative to step forward. Despite the outreach, the phones remained silent. Every potential lead evaporated into nothingness, leaving the detectives with no new direction. The mystery took hold of the public's imagination. People wondered about the woman the papers called the girl with the scorpion tattoo. Everyone wanted to know who she was. More importantly, they wanted to know who was capable of such a horrific act of violence. The media attention was intense, but the efforts of the Richmond County and NYPD investigators were met with constant failure. Science was at a standstill. DNA technology of the era and dental records failed to trigger a match in any existing database. The investigation eventually went cold for nearly 3 decades. In 2008, the district attorney's office attempted to revive the search. They submitted the victim's biological data to the federal authorities. Once again, the FBI's systems returned no useful results. Without a name, the victim was eventually laid to rest in an unmarked grave. She was buried on Hart Island, far from her home. Change finally arrived in 2019. District Attorney Michael McMahon decided it was time for a modern forensic approach. In April 2021, authorities utilized newly approved forensic genealogy techniques. The district attorney, FBI, and NYPD collaborated to uncover the long-hidden truth. This joint effort sought clarity. Finally, after 30 years, a significant breakthrough surfaced. Investigators spent months building a family tree for the nameless, unidentified victim. They narrowed her identity until every genealogical path led to a single answer. Samples went to Othram. Analysts identified potential relatives in New Jersey and New York. A brother was located. He provided the DNA swab needed to confirm her identity. Laboratory results proved a match. At that moment, her name was finally restored. The woman found beaten with a hammer and burned on Staten Island was identified. She was 29-year-old Christine Belusco. This revelation brought a secondary, chilling discovery. Detectives learned that Christine had a daughter. 2-year-old Krista Nicole was also missing. The child had vanished when her mother disappeared. The brother knew nothing of this. He only learned of Krista's disappearance when investigators contacted him decades later. At the time of her death, Christine was a single mother at Rainbow Shops. No store employees reported her missing. Her family also failed to raise an alarm. Krista was last seen with her mother at the Mount Airy Lodge 1 week earlier. Looking at the Belusco file, several facts simply did not align. What happened to Christine? Why did no family members report the mother and child? Christine's biological mother had 8 other children. She lived in nearby New Jersey. As an infant, Christine was placed for adoption. She joined the Belusco family. Frank, a glass molder, and Dorothy raised her. They provided a home in Montville. She was raised as their own. Years later, Christine discovered she was adopted. This revelation prompted her to leave. She headed for Florida, stopping in Pennsylvania. After staying at the Mount Airy Lodge, her body was found. She was dead. Relatives believed she had simply moved. They assumed she was starting over in Florida. The savage nature of the crime suggests an acquaintance. The murderer knew her. The brutality was personal. Investigators wondered if Lloyd L. was involved in the slaying. Arrested in 1991, Lloyd L. is now deceased. He cannot offer answers. For decades, she was known only as the girl with the scorpion tattoo. The tattoo's location kept it hidden. It was not a detail known to many. Since the mark was on her buttocks, no one came forward with information. The hunt for the killer continues. Krista Nicole remains missing, perhaps with no memories. Perhaps Christine's family can finally offer a remembrance now that the truth is known. On October 6, 1971, another body was discovered in Bedford, New Hampshire. The remains lay near the Route 101 bypass on Milton Road. The remains had decomposed beyond recognition. Technology was limited in the 70s. Police could only determine age and hair color. She was 25 to 35, standing 61 to 65 inches tall. Her brown hair matched a maroon blouse. It featured lace detailing at the neck. She wore hip-hugger shorts and size 7 sandals. No identification was found. There were no personal items to reveal her name. Her identity remained a mystery. She had been dead for 3 months. Recognition was impossible without a face. No missing person reports existed. This made identifying the remains extremely difficult. The investigation stalled for years. The case eventually went cold and was forgotten. In 1993, authorities consulted facial reconstruction experts to create a clay likeness. Forensic artists rendered a likeness, circulating composite images to give the nameless victim a face. They waited for a lead that never materialized. Silence followed. No one stepped forward to identify her. Hopes faded as the case stagnated. The file gathered dust until 2006, when officials attempted the reconstruction process again. A new visual impression was generated. Despite the updated effort, the investigation eventually hit another familiar wall. Persistence outweighed the setbacks. By 2020, emerging forensic capabilities offered a new path toward identification. With genetic genealogy approved, New Hampshire established a specialized cold case unit to tackle their most stubborn mysteries. This team collaborated with anthropologists and digital reconstruction experts. They sought a definitive portrait of the deceased. A refined image was produced and shared. Yet, a likeness alone could not bridge the gap to her identity. Every traditional lead resulted in a dead end. Finally, state police sought the expertise of the Jane Doe project. Between 2020 and 2022, they utilized genetic genealogy to find a biological link. Exhaustive research eventually produced a match. Forensic genealogists connected the remains to a living branch of a family tree. A sibling had submitted DNA to a public database. This digital footprint finally bridged the 50-year gap of anonymity. After 5 decades of silence, the woman found in the New Hampshire woods finally had her name back. Investigators contacted the relatives immediately. The family provided the essential personal history that the case had long lacked. Following these meetings, authorities confirmed the identity. The remains belonged to Catherine Ann Alston, known simply as Kathy. She was 26 when she vanished. Her life began in 1945 in Chelsea, Massachusetts. A 1963 graduate of Dorchester High, she later pursued her studies at Boston University. It was there she met Ralph Lawson Garrett Jr. The college sweethearts married in November 1967. Kathy was 22 at the time of her wedding. However, the marriage was destined for a sudden conclusion. The couple eventually divorced. Official reports indicate no evidence of significant domestic disputes leading to the separation. By the time Kathy was identified, Garrett had already passed away. He could offer no insight into her disappearance. The date of his death remains undisclosed by police. In the summer of 1971, Kathy's family prepared to relocate. They were moving from Massachusetts to Texas. It is unclear if Kathy intended to join them in their new life. She was scheduled to meet them at Logan International Airport. Kathy never arrived for the flight. Her family waited until departure before leaving for Texas without her. Strangely, their departure was marked by an absence of alarm. No follow-up inquiries were made. When police finally located the family, they found both parents had since passed away. The silence had lasted a lifetime. Not a single relative had seen or spoken to Kathy since that day in 1971. After her divorce, Kathy had been sharing a Boston residence with a man named David Cornier. The exact nature of their relationship is unknown. Public records provide virtually no information regarding David's background. Even his age remains a mystery. Detectives believe he likely possessed critical information regarding Kathy's final known movements. David likely held the key to her disappearance. However, he has effectively vanished from the record. His current whereabouts remain unknown. Locating him is still a primary objective for investigators seeking the truth. Despite the questions, Kathy's identity is no longer a secret. 5 decades of searching finally yielded a name. Investigators gave her siblings the answers they lacked for half a century. They finally knew where she had been. The identification is not the end of the story. The homicide investigation remains active, focused on a singular mystery. What happened to Catherine Ann Alston in 1971? Years later, in September 1978, another discovery occurred. A woman's body was found wrapped in carpet at a dump site near the old Byram Swinging Bridge in Mississippi. She carried no identification. Furthermore, no missing person reports had been filed in the surrounding area. The body was transported to a state laboratory. An autopsy began the grim task of documenting her final moments. Authorities recorded her fingerprints for the FBI. Severe injuries to her forehead told a clear story of blunt force trauma. The coroner officially ruled the death a homicide. She was the victim of a violent encounter that remains shrouded in mystery. Examiners determined she had been dead for several days. A composite sketch was released, pleading for someone to recognize her. No witnesses came forward. The case grew cold, relegated to the files of the unidentified and the forgotten. Every attempt to name the victim proved unsuccessful. For years, the investigation circled the same lack of evidence. They waited for forensic science to catch up. Then, in 2021, an Ohio detective took a renewed interest. While reviewing cold files, investigators contacted coroner David Ruth. They brought up a specific mystery from 1978. It was the case of an unidentified woman. Ruth petitioned the court to exhume her remains. She had been interred under a nameless headstone. Judge Judy Arthur reviewed the evidence and granted the order. The investigation officially resumed. Ruth sent the recovered forensic material to a facility, but they found nothing. The victim remained a ghost. Refusing to yield, Ruth sought a second opinion from another laboratory. Again, the results were inconclusive. Yet, the coroner's resolve did not waver. He turned to Othram, a Texas facility specializing in forensic genetic genealogy. They had a reputation for breaking dead ends. In this instance, they succeeded once more. Technicians extracted a viable profile. The genetic sequence finally linked the woman to her living relatives. After 45 years, the silence broke. She was identified as Tonya Lee Wills Mullins, a 22-year-old who vanished in 1978. Tonya was a mother. She left behind two young daughters, Tammy Mullins and Christy Mullins. She had married her high school sweetheart, James Mullins. For years, they built a life together. They left Texas for Mississippi, hoping for better employment. Those opportunities never materialized. Work was scarce. James decided to return to Texas alone to secure a home for the family. He was away for a brief period. When he finally returned to Simpson County, his world had vanished. Tonya and the children were gone. That same month, authorities in Rankin County discovered a female body. The remains lay discarded near the old Byram swinging bridge. Investigators later reconstructed the timeline using family statements. They detailed the chaotic aftermath of her disappearance. Tammy's last memory of her mother is now 45 years old. She was only 3. Relatives told young Christy that her mother was lost, but would return if she were able. Faith was all they had. 3 months after the disappearance, Tammy's grandmother received an unexpected phone call. The caller instructed the family to meet Tonya's brother at the airport. The girls were coming home. The uncle delivered Tammy and Christy to Texas. He claimed Tonya would contact them soon. That contact never happened. James returned to Mississippi repeatedly, searching for the woman he lost. Every lead went cold. Desperate, James questioned Tonya's brother again regarding her location. The story shifted. The brother alleged Tonya had fled to Mexico with an unidentified individual. Later, the story changed again. He claimed she was in Florida. During this time, James reportedly received a letter. It was postmarked months after her disappearance. Tammy, still a child, could not comprehend the document's importance. Retrospective analysis suggests the letter was a fabrication. Tonya was already dead before it was ever mailed. She was a victim of a cruel deception. For decades, Tammy clung to the flickering fragments of her childhood. She remembered their time in Simpson County. Most of those mental images were bathed in warmth. She saw her family together in the living room. She remembered the joy of jumping on a trampoline with her mother. The why haunted her. Tammy spoke of the crushing weight of navigating a life defined by an absence. Grief sometimes curdled into resentment for being left behind. Questions multiplied, but answers remained out of reach. This year, one truth finally emerged. Tonya had not left. She had been dead for 45 years. She lay in a Pearl cemetery, marked only as Jane Doe. Now, the family demands to know who took her life. They seek the source of 45 years of agony. Tammy is not the only person pursuing the truth. Detectives are equally determined to solve the mystery. The investigation into her death remains active. Tammy intends to reclaim her mother's remains. She will finally provide the dignity of a proper burial. The family will gather to honor Tonya's memory. The service will be a solemn reclamation of her identity. Tammy's sons, both priests, will lead the rites. Though the killer remains at large, the shadow is receding. Identification is the first step toward justice. With a name, the path to the truth becomes clearer. Every name matters. They were found in silence, nameless, forgotten, swallowed by time and cold indifference. For decades, they lay beneath unmarked headstones, known only as Jane Doe. No flowers, no family, no justice. Just a number in a file that no one wanted to close. But some people refused to let them disappear forever. Detectives who carried those cases like a weight on their souls. Scientists who bent over bone and DNA long after hope had faded. Families who spent lifetimes wondering, why didn't she come home? This is the power of persistence, of refusing to surrender a human being to anonymity. Because every woman found alone in those woods had a mother who loved her, children who needed her, a laugh someone still remembers in dreams. Modern forensic genealogy didn't just solve cold cases. It gave daughters back their mothers. It replaced Jane Doe with Tonya, with Catherine, with a real name spoken aloud at last. The lesson is profound. No one should be forgotten. Science, compassion, and stubborn determination can light even the darkest cold case. And when a name is finally spoken, that is the sound of justice beginning.